Hello and welcome to MMA Crips Fighting Talk. On today's show, we'll be going 3 rounds of action from UFC Fight Night Nogueira Vs Nelson, featuring John Howard versus Ryan LaFlare, Tatsuya Kawajiri versus Clay Guida, and finally Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira versus Roy Nelson. Joining me on today's show, as always, Mr. Greg Marshall. Welcome to MMA Crips Fighting Talk, Greg.
Hello, and let's talk about some fights.
Okay, let's start with round 1. John Howard versus Ryan LaFlare. Now, I mentioned before this fight, Greg, this was an evenly matched fight. Some really good matchmaking by the UFC in this one. During the fight, I felt like it was a close contest, as predicted, but obviously the main talking point to this, Greg, was the low blows by Ryan LaFlare. Apparently, he cracked the cup of John Howard. First off, give us your thoughts on the fight.
It was a better fight than I was expecting. I thought it might have been a bit of a boring fight, to be honest. I thought LaFlare might have just took him down and laying him for periods of the fight, and it turned out to be a better fight than I expected. But Howard getting caught, I think, I don't know if he was putting it on a little more than some people thought. He seemed to be fine 1 minute and then he'd be in complete pain the next. Was he really hurt? I don't know.
Well, I noticed after the fight, Greg, he was like grimacing, after the fight ended. Maybe he was just like, he knew he lost the fight. Maybe he was like, like, oh, now I'll pretend that I'm really hurting. But there was a Twitter picture. I sent it on the Facebook. I didn't actually go into this, so I'm not going to say this was the actual picture or somebody just playing a prank. But there's a cracked cup with blood on it. They were saying it was John Howard's. I'm not sure if this is fake or real. So if to any listeners, go and check it out and, see if it's fake or real. But do you believe that the groin shot cost John Howard the fight, Greg?
Possibly, yeah. But again, it depends if whether he was really hurt. Like when he got hurt, it looked like he was genuinely hurt, to be fair. And there was the point where the doctor came in and the doctor touched him just around the midsection, and it looked like a guy who was in real pain.
Yeah.
But then when he found out that it was only about 30 seconds to go before the fight would be called an end, he suddenly started moving as if there was nothing wrong with him again. And then it didn't look like it affected him from then till the end of the fight. And then as soon as the final buzzer went, he started leaning over and making out that he was hurt again, which seemed a bit strange, because if he was really hurt, there was about 4 or 5 times right after the fight started again that LaFlare hit him with a knee to the midsection, and a couple of he was punching him there as well. And none of them really looked to have any great effect on him. Now, if he was really hurt, to me, he would have been doubled up in pain at that point.
Well, he sort of like he took the full nearly 5 minutes. Like the ref said how long he's left, and he said a minute, and he went over and explained that to John Howard. Then all of a sudden, John Howard, like, he's like, it's pretty much do or die at that point, Greg. It's like, I've got under a minute to make a decision here. Do I carry on fighting? Do I not? He's pretty much just sat up then, where he's literally on the floor in pain. Then all of a sudden he just sits up and he stands up and he just starts fighting again.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that you get fighters who do take near the full 5 minutes. Normally they have like a bit of a crouch down. The one I last seen take the full 5 minutes was Rich Franklin, I think, against Vanderlei Silva. He was the last one I seen take nearly the full 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So he must have been hurt. It must have been a bad one, but it didn't look as bad as what John Howard made it out to be. It was straight up the pipe, which technically I think he should have had a point taken away, because there's the inside leg kick where you sort of catch the cup, but when you throw you throw like right up the pipe, dead on into the nuts. Yeah. I was starting to think, has he got a crow cop here where his ball's actually gone up inside him? You know what I mean? That's what I was starting to think at first. Well, let's move away from the groin strike and whatnot, Greg. There was some pretty fucking good grappling exchange in that fight. What do you make of them?
Yeah, it was like I said, it was a good fight. Much better than I was expecting, and the grappling exchanges were really good. Some good work there.
Now, John Howard's mainly known for his striking. Like, we know he's okay in the grappling, but geez, did he impress you there, Greg? Because we know Ryan LaFlare, he's a fucking stud,
Well, like I said, I expected LaFlare to kind of dominate him, get on top of him, and just kind of make it a kind of boring fight. But Howard worked hard, and he managed to dominate him in points as well.
Well, I felt LaFlare played a very smart game, because he kept taking John Howard's back. And was pretty smart of him. He was always on the back of John Howard throughout the fight. Obviously, when you got somebody's back, it makes it difficult. Do you know what I mean? That's how you really win a fight. Because when you're in somebody's guard, they can sort of like they can whip the guard. Do you know what I mean? They can work their way back to the feet easier. It's much harder to work your way back to your feet when your opponent's got your back.
Yeah.
So I felt like LaFlare took the best position on the ground he could. He kept taking his back. But even Howard kept rolling through for knee bars and fucking leg locks. That was really impressive by Howard.
I thought there was one point where I really thought he had it locked in as well, but on hindsight, he didn't quite have it there, but he was really, really close at one point to hooking in that leg lock.
But say another thing with John Howard, like we've seen with Dennis Hallman, like Dennis Hallman was on his way to a victory against him. Like you can never count this guy out. Like literally, he could knock you out from the beginning of the fight all the way to the end. You know what I mean? I don't feel that way about a lot of fighters. Now for me, LaFlare, he had a tough fight in that. I think he thought he was gonna beat Howard more dominantly than he did, to be honest with you. Even after the groin strike, like John Howard, he just showed so much heart to carry on. And, he showed at the start of round 3, he tagged LaFlare a good few times. You think, geez, is this it? Is he going to knock him out now? LaFlare, he went for the takedown, automatically got the back, playing it smart, taking his time. But still, just John Howard just kept making him work, rolling through for the knee bar, rolling through for the ankle lock, continuously making him work to the point where he escaped back control. When LaFlare got out of the ankle lock, he had no choice but to stand up with John Howard again. It's like, geez, you did really good, Howard. And it does make me think, would John Howard have won that third round in the fight? Because I had it one round apiece going to round 3. Would John Howard have won that fight if he didn't get kicked in the balls?
If he was as hurt as it appeared he was when he was down, then probably maybe would have, because he won the second round quite easily, I thought. And the third round, you'd expect him usually to go on and complete the win. And you can only imagine that the groin strike maybe did have an effect on him.
Well, I say props to both fighters. Really good fight, really entertaining. A good portion of this main card was really some really good matchmaking. I was really impressed with the matchmaking all round on this card, to be honest with you. So I'll say that first and foremost. Good fight. Well-deserved victory. Well, I won't say well-deserved victory for Ryan LaFlare. I think Ryan LaFlare can feel somewhat fortunate to get away with the win here. And sort of like, let's not be matched up with John Howard again. I think he could probably beat John Howard again in the future, because now he sort of knows what he's going to get with John Howard. And I do believe he is the better grappler. And so in a rematch, I think LaFlare would win a rematch. Well, so my final thought is, I feel like Ryan LaFlare can feel somewhat fortunate for getting away with the win here. And I think John Howard gave a good account for himself, to be honest. So both fighters move on, and in a good way, in my opinion, Greg. Would you agree?
Yeah. LaFlare, like you say, I think if they fought again, LaFlare would have him quite easily next time. He'd know what he needed to do to get the win next time. So in that respect, Howard should be probably quite pleased he came out of the fight looking quite good. And LaFlare's obviously got the win that's moved him on. So, both of them can move on quite happy.
Okay, let's move on to round 2. And Tatsuya Kawajiri versus Clay Guida. Now, this was a number 9 versus number 12 fight, so good matchmaking by the UFC. Regardless of the rankings, this was another good fight, like I mentioned before. They've put on some solid matchmaking in this one, really close. I would have said Kawajiri actually had the better striking before the fight, but geez, Clay Guida, damn, that overhand right was beautiful. First off, Greg, give us your thoughts on the fight and that overhand right from Clay Guida.
Yeah, Guida, I think maybe Guida was a bit more brave to strike because he wasn't too worried about what Kawajiri offered, which makes it easier to be a bit more brave. And he landed quite a few good ones. The strange thing for me was Guida took his back every single time in every round, numerous times, and Kawajiri just seemed to keep going for the grab the arm. He never seemed to try anything else, and he didn't manage to do anything with it at all in the first 2 rounds, yet he kept going with it in the third round. At that point, he should have been trying something else. And to be fair, Guida too, he kept taking the back and then doing nothing from the back, which was a bit disappointing. But it didn't make it a bad fight. It was a good fight. There was good action, and every time they split, there was a couple of good strikes landed, but it always went to the same thing again. Guida would grab him, take his back. Kawajiri would try and grab his arm. It was a bit disappointing. None of them really made a push to try and finish the fight.
I felt like Kawajiri made more of an effort in round 3, but again, the same sort of thing happened again.
At the point where he was making more effort, Guida would land a few shots, and then the same, like I said, the same story would happen again. Guida would go on his back, he would grab the arm. Instead of, he had to try and separate and try and throw down, but he just didn't.
Well, it was pretty much typical Guida, wasn't it, really? Tons of grappling, just constantly on you. But obviously, I was a bit worried for Guida. I was like, he brings this pace and this intensity to a fight, but I just felt going against Kawajiri, he was going to make a mistake at some point in the fight. Like, I was like, no, don't grapple with him. Like, just setting up the Kimuras. Every time Guida did grab hold of him, he was constantly setting up the Kimuras. And worst case scenario for Guida was obviously getting submitted. But what it did cause was a reversal. So Kawajiri always got out. I was a little bit disappointed in Kawajiri, to be honest, because I felt like he could have submitted Clay Guida, to be honest with you. Off his pedigree, I felt like he could have submitted Clay Guida. And I just feel like he didn't ever commit to a submission. He was just always happy getting the reversal, you know what I mean? And starting back standing again. But like you say, he was losing the striking battle. Before the fight, I thought it was a bad matchup for Clay Guida. And he really impressed me, because let's be honest here, we've seen what Kawajiri did in his last fight. This guy's not on his way out or anything like that. Well, he's a bit older now. He's not in his prime or anything, but still a very solid fighter.
Yeah.
I put this more on Clay Guida having a good performance. This was like Big Dog said it best on the site. He said, this was one of the best Clay Guida performances for a long while. And yeah. I thought it was. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. It was easily one of his best performances for a while. Lately, he's been completely different. But I think it's a lot down to the fact that he was facing a guy who doesn't really have great striking in Kawajiri. When he fights the other fights he's had, I think he's been a bit less impressive because he knows their striking's so good. I think when he knows he can be hit but not knocked out, he takes more chances and he takes more effort, more risk to be hit in order to make a hit. And I think that's what he was like against Kawajiri, and he's been like in the past against various guys.
Well, we'll discuss in the third round. Now, Kawajiri had that fucking tight guillotine locked in on Guida, and we've seen this all the time from Guida. I don't think there's anybody who can get out of guillotines like this guy can. He literally just powers out of him. That was in tight. Kawajiri was like, you could see Kawajiri just like yanking on the fucking thing, like, eee! And how he got his head out, it just pops. You can see how much power's in the choke. As soon as he pulls his head out, it's like, ping!
It almost looks like Guida puts himself in more danger in order to get himself out.
It's like I was saying before. I was like, I'm really shocked that Kawajiri didn't submit him. I thought, he was going to land. Clay Guida keep taking him down all the time. He was going to land into something. You know what I mean? Because these Japanese fighters, they don't look very dangerous, but slowly they're setting you up. They're feeling you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, he moves this way, he moves that way, then sort of just bam, they'll lock something on you. It's like shit. So when that guillotine was locked in, I was like, oh, he's done. He's walked right into that guillotine, but damn, he pulled his head out. I was like, how fucking impressive is that? And it's not the first time I've seen it. He just constantly does it.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, Clay Guida wants to jump up in weight and back down. He said he'll fight at 155. He says he has some unfinished business with Josh Thompson. And apparently he called out Conor McGregor too. We'll get to Conor McGregor in just a minute, but I don't like Clay Guida jumping up and down. What do you make of it?
I know the UFC won't like it either, so it just won't happen. So it's pointless, really. If he wants to go up to 155, he'll be told that's where he stays. They've said it to various guys. They don't like guys jumping from one weight to the next weight. You stay where you are. Conor McGregor's been, as you mentioned, he's one who's always looking for a fight at 155 or 145. He's been told you're a 145er. You stay there. Simple.
Well, apparently he called out Conor McGregor, as too did Jim Eilers, the new UFC fighter from Cage Warriors. It's like, who's not calling this guy out at the minute? It's like, should we even talk about it? Because like, there must be a big list of contenders. It's no point even talk about it because there's so many. It's like it's becoming unrealistic. I think if the UFC matched Conor McGregor with Clay Guida, I think that would be so devastating. That would be such a wrong move because I believe Clay Guida can beat him just off the style he brings. Yes. And I feel like Clay Guida's lost a bit of his name, to be honest. Like I said, this was a very good performance from Clay Guida in such a long time. I feel like back in like 2007, 2008, Clay Guida had a name. He was like just this regular guy coming through, but he brought this intense pace, and all the way up to like 2009, he was getting towards the title shot, but since like 2010, 2011, he's sort of like been dropping off a little bit, if you know what I mean. Mainly the last couple of years. I might be getting the years wrong there a little bit, but he sort of had the biggest name around 2007 till 2010, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And as for the opportunity with Conor McGregor, it's the wrong fight completely right now. Conor McGregor's not earned a fight with Clay Guida at this point in time. He needs to win a few other fights before he gets a fight like that. It would be a bad matchup as well because Guida could be too strong for it. Whether he would be too strong, but I can imagine Guida would be a tough fight for him because Guida would dance away from him the whole fight, and it just wouldn't look pretty.
I feel like Guida's a bad match for pretty much any fighter, to be honest with you, Greg. It's just one of those fighters, like, you know, unless he's like in the top 10, top 5, and he really does, beating him really does you a favour, and if giving him a good close fight does you a good favour, I just believe you should stay away from him at all costs because he's not the sort of fight you want to face because he'll either beat you or he'll give you a really good close fight. Just off his style, he just makes you look so poor sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially to the casual average fan. When you sort of know what he's doing, and like you see Kawajiri looking at Kimura, he's getting the reversal, you're like, oh, that's impressive, nice move getting out there. Like I said, I still felt Kawajiri could have tried latching onto a submission a little bit more than what he did. Because Guida always jumps in on you, you wrap up a triangle, wrap something up, So, but I think Diego Sanchez, we discussed before, Diego Sanchez, he needs brawlers, some, strike. Conor McGregor just brings such an entertaining fight to this guy. He'd be all over him like fucking Rash. So that's the sort of fight that they want to start sticking him in. There is going to come a time when they are going to put Conor McGregor in these fights, against the likes of Clay Guida.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't even think he's training at Straight Blast Gym anymore. I think he's moved. So obviously he's in America now. I think he's living in America. So it's pretty crazy. He's only had 2 fights in the UFC, yet he's, took fucking Bisping like 4 years before he can manage that. Just goes to show how much Conor McGregor's moved up in the world.
And it didn't take McGregor as long to get everybody wanting to fight him like everybody wants to fight Bisping. He's turned into Bisping overnight.
That's true, Greg. That really is true. Okay, let's move over to round 3. And the main event, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira versus Roy Big Country Nelson. Both fighters, in terms of age, on the downward side of the career. Roy's been looking a bit shaky in his past few UFC bouts. There's been a lot of talk of Roy going down to light heavyweight. Obviously, Nogueira's been on a sort of a win-loss record recently. Obviously, broke his arm against Frank Mir. What did you make of this fight, Greg, when it was announced and heading in? Was you excited for it? It's a bit of a strange sort of main event.
Excited? No. It's not really the type of fight that you get excited for these days. 5 years ago, maybe. Not so much now. Big Nog's not looked as if he's endangering anyone for a while now. On paper, it was quite an obvious win that Nelson would knock him out because Nog showed that he's got a dodgy chin recently. Nelson was bound to land one of those overhand rights, and that's exactly what happened. I stupidly thought that at the last minute that Nogueira would maybe manage to see through the first round. If he could possibly just tie him up and win a decision. I was expecting too much. It was obvious to anyone that Roy was always going to land that shot. And as for Roy, it was a fight that was set up for him to win, really, because Roy beats these kind of guys. It's the guys who are more top 10 guys basically beat Roy, and non-top 10 guys lose to Roy, which is just the way it always is.
I knew. Look, even at the weigh-ins, like I looked at it and I thought, why are you even there? Why are you there, Nogueira? It's like, I don't mean that. Well, that sounds really disrespectful, but I just knew he was going to get beat. And even the bookmakers, they had the odds like pretty close. To be honest with you, they give Roy Nelson some fucking good odds, and I just knew that's guaranteed money. Like we play about with the quick cash on the site, and I banged straight 10 million on the fucker. I was like, no hesitation. I just knew he was going to win. Now, I don't think we've seen the same Nogueira who fought Randy Couture, you know what I mean? because that fight against Randy Couture was so fucking damn impressive. That was probably one of the better fights he's ever had. Now, obviously, coming off the Frank Mir loss, he had staph infection. Do you know the first time? It was like, then he fought Randy Couture. Then you really got to see Nogueira. But in recent fights, he's just looked so terrible. Even in his wins against like Pee Wee Herman, who was just falling. He had like drug problems anyway. He was addicted to painkillers. He wasn't even all there in the fight. He was just falling around everywhere. He just looked so poor, so slow.
Yeah.
Do you know what? It's really sad to see. Like his last decent fight, when he looked really good, was the Brennan Schwab fight, and since then I don't like calling for fighters' retirement, to be honest with you, but geez, it was a foregone conclusion, and I want to talk about the ref too. That guy, what the fuck was he doing? Like, he got knocked down 2 times already, and he's walking around the cage like Frankenstein, like bobbling around, like can't get his footing, and the rest just stood there. I felt like the fight should have been stopped beforehand. Like, the knockout was just pointless. There was just no point in that knockout happening. I was actually pretty disgusted. Like, would you agree that the ref should have maybe got in there sooner? I know we always talk about late ref stoppages. I don't really like to delve into ref stoppages a lot of the time because it's like, it's a hard job, but he wasn't in that fight. It was like waiting for the inevitable to happen.
Yeah, it's one of these things, like, you quite often hear guys complaining about early stoppages because the guy's still in the fight and whatever. And I can see why the ref let it carry on because he was standing. But he wasn't standing, and he wasn't standing with any purpose, or he was clearly wobbling. He was clearly not able to fight. Just because he's standing doesn't mean he's able to fight. So yeah, in that respect, yeah, it was a late stoppage. But there's a lot of people out there who would consider that if the fight had been stopped when Big Nog was standing, it would have been a travesty because the guy was standing. So I can sort of see where the ref's kind of coming from that respect, but it didn't need to go on. He was clearly beaten, and it was always going to be the case that Nelson was going to hurt him again, and it was unnecessary for him to hurt him again.
It was just a bad style matchup too. Like when Nogueira gets hurt, he relies on his jiu-jitsu. He was always good in Pride at taking people down. Like he was good at the trip takedowns. He would pull guard on people if he was hurt, and he'll just have a rest there and take his time. First of all, you're not going to do that to big country, So he's fought there, so he's going to have to carry on standing up. And he just didn't look... He just looked out of it. He really did. He had no defense. That big right hand was just... The only reason that big right hand of fucking Roy Nelson didn't land all the time was because, like, he was either out of range and Roy didn't, he didn't aim it correctly. He was just like... When you wing that overhand right like that, it's sort of like guessing in a way. You sort of try and time it, but you can't, see where you're throwing it.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason that fucker wasn't landing. And let's be honest, he got knocked down 3 times in 1 round.
Yeah.
But it was all by the same punch too, Greg. How poor's that? Is that like poor on fucking Nogueira's part? Because to get knocked down 3 times by the same punch. Obviously, the first knockdown, it involved an uppercut too. But,
to be fair, I would only consider the first one, because the second and the third one, I don't think he knew what was going on. He wasn't even in the fight at that point.
Roy should have blown at him.
Yeah,
he would have fucking fell over.
He wasn't even in the fight. He wouldn't have been able to see anything coming at that point. So I don't really hold anything against him for the second and third one landing, just the first one.
Do you like how Roy was composed, and took his time, because he rocked him in that first one. He could have been all over him, but he knew it was a fair. He knew it was a 5-round fight, and he didn't go in for the kill. That sort of impressed me a little bit.
It did. I suppose it's common sense for Nelson. If he jumped on top of him, or did something stupid, he could have got his leg grabbed. He could have got an arm grabbed. That was the only chance that Nogueira had to win in the fight, was to grab a limb and submit him. So Nelson played clever. I'll not waste any energy by doing that and risk getting caught. I'll let him stand up and I'll just land another one. And so it was clever fighting in some respects for Nelson.
Well, apparently Nogueira's manager, after the fight, he called for a Frank Mir rematch. Like I say, I was talking about why you're even there, and not in a disrespectful way. Well, it might be disrespectful. I don't mean it to be. I'm just trying to give my opinion. I just didn't feel like he should have been fighting Roy Nelson. I didn't feel like he was going to win. But Frank Mir's not looked too clever himself, and the first fight he had staph infection. He didn't look like the fight in Randy Couture. You know what I mean? He come back and he looked so much better against Randy Couture. So the first fight you can sort of see why there was a second fight. Frank Mir got all pissed off at Joe Rogan for saying he had a staph infection. Nogueira had a staph infection, and that's why Frank Mir probably won. But let's be honest, Frank Mir's not the best striker, and he looked like a world-class striker against Nogueira that night, didn't he? You know what I mean? That clearly wasn't the same Nogueira. The second fight, Nogueira was twatting him. He's fucking whooping him up against the cage, had him on wobbly legs, knocking him out nearly. And then all of a sudden he starts going for submissions and start playing grappling. And Frank just held onto that arm and, he just rolled through and then managed to get the fucking Kimura and pop the fucker. So Frank got lucky in the second fight for me. If Nogueira just carried on punching him, it would have been a TKO stoppage. It was literally if he carried on punching him, it would have been 5 seconds from getting finished. But Nogueira sort of like was in two minds. His neck was there. Frank fell down. I thought Frank was out in the second fight. And Nogueira's like and ahhing, like, oh, do I go for a submission? Like, obviously, he's a jiu-jitsu guy, isn't he? So when he sees a neck and somebody on the knees, he's automatically going to go for it. Do you know what I mean? And he just made a mistake. Now, if he carried on punching him, just stayed there and punching him, the fight would have been stopped and he would have got a win. So the trilogy would have really made sense. But to me, the trilogy still makes sense. Frank Mir's not looked too good. Nogueira's not looked too good. I think Nogueira should just hang him up. But like I say, you are always as good as your last fight. So Nogueira comes out, knocks the fuck out of Frank Mir and submits him. You're saying, oh, one more fight than Nogueira. But to me, one of these guys has to go really from the UFC. Frank's getting fucking smashed around the cage now. Nogueira didn't look too good. It's time for one of these guys to hang it up. Would you say like a retirement match, Frank Mir versus Nogueira trilogy?
I don't like the idea of calling it a trilogy. Because a trilogy should only happen if it's one win for each guy.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it doesn't make any sense at all. But in the fact that they're both on such bad records recently, obviously Mir's lost 4 straight, and his last win was against Big Nog, and Nog's lost five out of his last 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
It makes sense in that respect that they're 2 guys far out of the title picture, big names, would be a decent fight, but it would have to be on the basis that both of them retire at the end of it. A winner, whoever wins that fight, can't suddenly come away thinking, yes, I could go on and win another fight now. Because no, you can't. You just can't. No, unless you're facing guys that are way down the rankings and they're pointless fights. None of the two of them should, realistically, the fight doesn't make any sense. None of them should fight. They should both retire. But if they're going to fight, then retire at the end of it.
But we sort of do that as fans, though, Greg. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if one of them does look impressive in that fight and they come out with a really good win, we're like, oh yeah, let's have one more. You match up pretty well, It's like when Vanderlei Silva beat Kung Lee. We're like, if he lost that fight because he was getting his ass whooped a little bit beforehand, you'd be like, it's time to retire Vanderlei. But then he comes back, he breaks the guy's nose, he knocks him out. You're like, oh yeah, fantastic. Stick him against Belfort now. And, stick him against fucking Chael Sonnen. Like, that's just the way we are as fans, you know what I mean? We could have done like 2 or 3 shows on Vanderlei, a retirement show on Vanderlei, like in the past few years, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And now the guy's a coach and fighting Chael Sonnen, who really, he was a title contender, but look at him. If he gets knocked out by Vanderlei Silva, we're calling for his retirement. Yeah. Oh, and I can't forget the Brian Stand. Sorry, that's an impressive knockout by Vanderlei. But it just goes to show, like, you can have a couple of bad fights and a couple of good ones. Now, I do believe the injury did play a part with Nogueira. The broken arm. That's tough to come back from. And just the desire to train, the desire to get in the gym every day, and because you have to train hard as a mixed martial artist. You have to train really, really hard. And to be fair, Roy is a big test. To be honest, he really is. Just stylistically, I felt.
Is he? I would debate that. Roy Nelson's not a top 10 guy, and if he is, he's a fringe top 10 guy.
Yeah, but I just think stylistically it was just bad for him.
Because stylistically maybe, but then so is everyone. Anyone in the top 10 is stylistically bad for Big Nog right now.
But then let's be honest. If you look back at his Pride fights, he was a very good boxer.
Yeah, right. Well, let's look back at his Pride fights. Let's see. Oh yeah, that was in 2006. That's 8 years ago. He's not 8 years ago. This is 2014. Big Nog's been finished for a while. The guys he's beaten, like, look at his record. In the last 6 years, he's beaten Dave Herman and Brendan Schaub. That's it. He's had 2 wins in 6 years over Dave Herman and Brendan Schaub.
Let's be honest, Dave Herman was just falling about. You could have just punched
him. He's not had a worthy win for a long, long time. Randy Couture's his last worthy win, and that was that's inside 6 years actually. That's 2009, but that was his last worthy win. And even the one before that, Tim Sylvia. Sylvia was done at that point as well. What's he done since then? Yeah. He's went away and lost fight after fight elsewhere.
He's got away in at burgers.
Yeah. I mean, I like Big Nog and all that, but the time is now to call it a day. Unless he wants to keep fighting Dave Hermans. That's the only way he's going to survive in the UFC, if they keep throwing him up Dave Hermans.
Well, you certainly sold me on it, Greg, to be honest with you. Well, one last question. Do you think he will carry on fighting? Because, let's be honest, the UFC will cut him. They could cut him. If they don't make that Frank Mir match, I think they're going to cut him anyway. I think he's done. But do you think he will retire? Because we know these Brazilians, you know what I mean? They like to fight. He could easily go and fight elsewhere in Brazil. You know, look at Paulo Filho and Ninja Rua. They still come out of retirement now and again. Like, you know, do you think it's the last time we see Nogueira? I don't think it is.
No, neither do I. I don't think he'll be cut, and I don't think he'll retire, unfortunately. And I think the Mir fight may well happen. I'll watch it, but I'll be disappointed.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's show. From MMA Crips Fighting Talk, thank you for watching.